Hey, my name is Joe. I'm here. I purchased this projection kaleidoscope inflatable, and I really love it. It's a really nice looking yard piece that I have over the holidays. But this particular one, the kaleidoscope feature inside of it has stopped working. So I'm going to attempt to repair it. And I did some Google searches, and I wasn't able to find anyone that has done this yet. And I've seen people that have the yard kaleidoscopes that have repaired them. So I'm hoping that it's a similar procedure with this. In a moment I'll inflate this and I'll show you how this one is not working. The first couple of years that I use this, it worked flawlessly. So the fan still works, it inflates perfectly, there's no tears, no dry rot or anything like that. The only problem I have is the kaleidoscope inside it is not working anymore. Okay, so what I've found so far is if you flip this thing upside down, just to the side of the fan unit, there is this little box here, okay? As you can see, I'll just do a little close up here. And what I did was, I unzipped this on the other side. I have a zipper on here so it lets the air out rapidly. And if I reach over to the other side, I pull this out, and that's the kaleidoscope. Okay. Now, what's really interesting about this is I have purchased in the past I've bought these kaleidoscopes, and these are also made by Gemmy, which I didn't realize until I was doing a search. And this is one that works off 110 volts. You plug it in, and then it has a stake with it, and you stick it in your front yard and shine it up on your house. Now, if you look at these two devices, they look very, very similar. Now, I found some videos on how to repair these and where someone's taken them apart, but I've not found anybody that's taken one of these apart. So I'm hoping that this is going to be a first for all. From the outside, you'll see this base here, and there are three screw holes in here. And I tried using a Phillips Screwdriver and some other screwdrivers that I have, and I could not do anything. So what I did was, I shine my little flashlight in there, and I recognized that they're Torx screws. And if you don't have any Torx drivers, I don't recommend going out and buying a set just for this project. But if you have any, just regular short ones aren't going to do the trick. So just so happens I had a set of these extended versions of Torx drivers. If you look, you can see the Torx tips on those. These are actually security Torx. You don't have to use security Torx. It looks like they're just standard Torx drives. So let's take these screws out and see what happens. Now, as I'm doing this, I can feel the back side of this. I can feel the back side of this coming loose. So I'll get these out, set these to the side. Now I'll just put them on the bench. So I'm looking to see if this cover comes off. It doesn't appear to come off. We'll do it this way. Flip it around to the inside. Oh, and now this comes off the top, and Looks like it has a rubber gasket in here to make it weather tight. And then it has like a little kaleidoscope wheel that rotates around. So just by glancing inside, I don't see where there's been any water damage or anything. So the rest of the screws in here look like they're Phillips screws. So let me grab a Phillips screwdriver here. I'm just going to loosen these two screws here because they look like they're holding the frame of this kaleidoscope in there. Wiggle it a little bit, so it does not seem that that is the case. Then there are two more screws right here and here. I'm going to go ahead and loosen those up. And now the entire assembly seems to be lifting out. Alright, so it looks like there's a power supply and a motor. And it looks like the power supplies, looks like it supplies probably 12 volts to these LEDs here. And then the LED, and then the separate power supply that looks like it's going to the motor. The two black wires going to the motor, and then a black and red wires going to the LEDs. Okay, so I'll just start down here at this level here, because this is what we're trying to get into. Okay, so I pulled this power supply out, so I have you can have a clear look of the black and red wires, and they're going to the LED ring that goes around here. And then the black wire is going to the motor. And so if you look at the motor is a 120 volt AC motor. So that means it's not being affected by the power supply. So if we open up this little box, let's take a screwdriver and just release these little tabs. We'll notice that it's a very simple power supply. It looks like it has a little transformer, a couple capacitors, and it probably has some sort of rectifier that changes the voltage that it can be used by the LED ring. But the black wires appear to be coming right off of the 110 volts that goes to the blower. So I'm thinking I would really like to plug this in to see if the motor's working. Is it just the motor, or is it the LED ring that's not working? So let me reach over here and we'll plug this in. Okay, so let's look. It appears that the motor is actually spinning and the LEDs are actually on right now, but they seem to be very dim. So not knowing exactly what the operating voltage is on these LEDs, I'm gonna get my multimeter, and I'll take my multimeter and I'll check those voltages. So I'm assuming these voltages are DC voltages. I'm not positive, but being red and blue, that would normally mean a DC voltage. So I'm gonna set this on the ground here. I'm gonna check the voltages from these two tabs. And this says 20 volts. It says 20 volts DC. I'm going to switch it to AC just to see if there's any AC voltage coming across here. And it appears to be nominal. So it's definitely DC, and it's at least 20 volts. So I will look at this board, and the way it's flickering, I assume that the problem is probably on this board. I wonder if that voltage is flickering while these LEDs are flickering. That could tell me it's a power supply issue. Let's switch it back to DC. So it's maintaining the 20 volts while the LEDs are flickering. So that makes me think that the problem is on this little circuit board. I've loosened the screws and I still haven't been able to get this blown apart. So I've got this 3-inch cutoff wheel and I'm going to try to cut the back end of this off. It depends on how determined you are to get into this thing. I'm very determined. I want to see if the parts in here are the same as the parts in my blow-up. And like most companies, if you design and you sell something that's a good product, you're going to probably use the same parts over and over again in your different products. Hopefully that's the case here, and I can get some useful parts out of here. And even if I don't, at least I can just be happy with the knowledge that I've destroyed this thing for a good purpose. So let's try getting inside this thing.
I guess I really don't know what Christmas is all about. Isn't there anyone who knows what Christmas is all about?
There we go. Now it appears to be, just from my first glance, there appears to be the same type of box power supply in this as there was in the blow-up. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to split this thing open just so I don't tear it up anymore.
Jack Frost.
Couple cuts in here, one on each side. Grab a screwdriver. Alright, let's see what we have. This thing is really, really in there, isn't it? Well, I think there's something going on inside of this cap. I'm going to cut it off. I'm going to cut around here and release whatever is going on. Well, I'm just going to keep cutting.
I can tell you what Christmas is all about.
Chestnuts roasting. Jack Frost nipping at your nose. So I'm offering this simple phrase. Although it's been said
A lot of work to fix a blow up, huh? But I am determined to see this through. Alright, so after stripping back everything, it appears that we have the same setup. We have a motor, and we have an LED disc. Okay? So, I want to try to get this globe off of here. I think, looks like I'm going to end up cutting this thing apart again.
Although it's been said many times, many ways, Merry Christmas to you.
Looks like very similar layout. The LEDs on the circuit board and the motor. So what I'm going to try to do now is plug the power in and see if this thing still works. Looks like it's working perfectly. The motor's turning and the LEDs are very, very bright. Alright, let's bring my digital multimeter over here. Now, we were reading 20 volts on the other LED board. On this LED board, it's very odd. I'm reading 8.5 volts. So, take these screws out here. Unfortunately, I broke the top of this motor. But the LED board seems to be perfectly intact. And that seems to be my main problem on my other Kaleidoscope. Now, my other Kaleidoscope seems to have similar numbers on this. The version model. And also 3 LED board, and it also says 90 volt -0. Now, I'm assuming that means it'll work anywhere between 0 and 90 volts, but I'm not sure. But the other one has the same markings. So I am going to go out on a limb, and I am going to cut these wires, and then I'm going to splice them onto my other Kaleidoscope, and just to see if maybe that would fix the problem. That would assume that the other power supply is still good. And this motor is different, the way the shaft is and the way it operates, so we don't really want this motor. Now we're back to our blow up, okay? So before I go trying to pop this little retainer off to replace this, I want to make sure that my replacement is going to function with this power supply. So what I'm going to do is, I wasn't just going to cut the wires, but I went ahead and got my soldering iron because I'd like this to be a nice clean repair. So I'm going to unsolder these connections and solder them over here. I'll go ahead and remove them from this board here. Alright, and then I'm going to solder them onto this board. And red. It's important to know the orientation. I just remember that the red was on my left. So, you solder them back on. Make sure they're on correct. Plus, there's also a plus sign here on the board, and the plus sign will go to the red. If this LED board was the problem, this one should work perfectly. So it's definitely quite bright. So that tells me that this LED board was definitely the problem. So as I look at this little kaleidoscope wheel, I notice there's a press-on, little press-on guy here that's the retainer that's holding it on. Just want to be very careful not to break this because I'm going to need to reuse it. So I'm just going to go around and just pry it. I'm just going to keep my finger on top of it so it doesn't go flying off into space. Because that's where they go. They go into space. Because I've never been able to find one of these after they've departed. So I can only assume that they went off into space somewhere. There we go. Okay, I've got the retaining clip off. And then carefully slide the wheel off. Just set that here. And I'm going to take this off. And then slide the new one over. And then just reassemble everything. And take this retaining clip and just put even pressure on it. Slide it over the shaft. Like that. This being one of my first YouTube videos, I was actually worried that this wouldn't work. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and put this back in, trying to duplicate the way it came out. Making sure that it lines up. Make sure it lines up with the mounting holes. Yeah, it's amazing how these things come out and just won't go back exactly the way they come in. But just fiddle around with it. It looks like this is going to go in here nicely. Looks like those holes are going to line up for the motor mounts, and then the other set of holes will line up for the LED mounts. So let's start with the motor. Start getting those mounted first. Should have used a magnetic screwdriver. Probably would have been a little easier. Okay, so I've gotten 2 screws in for the motor. Let's go ahead and tighten those down. Alright, now the LED board. Go ahead and get those screws lined up. So I'll go ahead and put these into position first. As I said before, I have a magnetic screwdriver, so it'll be a little tough once they're already down in there to get the second one in. Get the first one started, and we'll get the second one started. Okay. Tighten these down. All right. Well, we've got that part of it done. So, I'm going to go ahead and just set my globe in position. And power it up just to make sure that it's all still working. Yes. We're going to try to just back in the hole here. Hold on to the end of it so it doesn't come off. Alright, and then we find the other end. And then drop these in. All right. Excellent. All right. And voila,